The regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of June 21st, 2023 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Please join me in the singing of our national anthem. Oh, down our home and native land, through nature love, in all hearts command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Councilor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to call the public meeting to order? Councilors, Garwood and Deputy Cabral, that the public meeting of the council held under section 34 of the Planning Act for zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2023-10 by P&J Swala be called to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Welcome to this public meeting of the Township of Springwater Council held in compliance with section 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to the proposed amendments to the Township of Springwater zoning bylaw as amended. The first part of the meeting is to present the amendment. Following, the public will be given an opportunity to make an oral submission through Zoom, application, or in person. Any person wishing to make an oral submission is to have notified the township prior to 8:30 a.m. this morning and been added to the commenters list. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect to the zoning bylaw amendment does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or written submissions to the township before this proposed zoning bylaw amendment has passed, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. All comments and questions should be addressed through the chair. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of which meeting dates on which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the first day of June 2023 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 25 properties in the Township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendments would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Beaver Lane. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
No correspondence has been received for this application.
I will now call upon the applicant to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of the proposal. Please join us.
Hello. My name is Phil. This is my wife, Janet. We ended up buying this property. It had an existing building and we're just hoping to put an apartment for my 76-year-old mother-in-law who has moved in with us. So that's more or less why we're here for that.
Yes. She needs her independence, but she wants the security of us, so.
I will now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people that have registered to make comments regarding this application.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There are no members of the public who have registered to make oral submission for this application.
Any members of council have any questions or comments regarding this application? All right. And that was easy. That was it. Thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and for showing interest in this matter. So thank you very much. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn this public meeting? I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Fisher that the meeting of council held under section 34 of the Planning Act for ZB 2023-10 does now adjourn at 6:35 p.m. And council, may I now have a mover and seconder to refer ZB 2023-001. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed. Take that back. May I have a mover and seconder to refer ZB 2023-001 Johnson back to staff? I have councillors Thompson and Garwood that council, having held a public meeting in accordance with section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended on zoning bylaw amendment 2023-10, and having noted correspondence be received. And we now direct that the application be referred back to staff. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion? And seeing none, all in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to question period. Clerk Ainsworth, have any submissions been received?
Thank you. 2 submissions have been received and both have requested that I read their submissions on their behalf. The first is from Nadia Diamici of 17 Diamici Crescent in Midhurst. And they write, good evening, Mayor Coughlin and councillors. I would like to know where electric charging stations are or are proposed in the Midhurst proper. Does the township of Springwater have any place now? If so, who paid for installation and how much? I hope these stations are going to cost the electric company or car manufacturer, as they're the ones benefiting from the purchases. As a taxpayer and in keeping with the council projections to keep our town budget for 23, 24, 25, I strongly recommend that council not put this burden on taxpayer shoulders. Costs for these electric stations should be provided by electric companies and/or automobile manufacturers, as they are providing this change to happen and they all have hefty profit lines. Please advise. Thank you. The second submission comes from Jack Hanna of 22 Frid Boulevard in Midhurst. And he states, the following information and questions are provided to help keep you informed of taxpayer concerns. While volunteering at the Midhurst Soapbox Derby on June 17th, several residents questioned me about the following. Finley Mill Road from Doran to Bayfield. Why has the township failed to make the needed repairs to Finley Mill Road? Some members of council may not be aware of the past complaints and ongoing requests for repairs. And then regarding Midhurst Heights development, with reference to the above development, when will the required public meeting take place to answer some of the following questions that I received? When will the construction of houses commence? What is the planned route for sewer and water lines? Will Forbes Road extension to Highway 27 be constructed before the trucks start rolling? And thank you in advance for any information to taxpayers' questions.
Thank you, Clerk Ainsworth, and through to CO Schmidt, or if we'd have GM Ramdeo available if you wanted to provide comment on that, or we can address that at another time. Sorry, I just don't see a GM Ramdeo jumping on. There he is. Thank you, GM Ramdeo.
Good evening, Mayor Coughlin. Sorry, I do have a slight infection, so my voice is a bit hoarse. I can, through you to all of council, I can provide some updates to both questions if you wish, to both question period. On the EV stations, the municipality does not have existing EV stations at this point in time. Should we proceed with EV stations per the report in front of council today, they will be, the ones in Midhurst would be at the administrative center. So from that perspective. In terms of Mr. Jack Hanna's questions on Finley Mill, in terms of the repairs, we do undertake repairs. We do monitor that road on a very regular basis, weekly basis, and we do our repairs that are necessary to keep it in a state of good repair. The developer will do some upgrading works on Finley Mill as part of their works that they will be doing there, which includes a sewage main and a water main and road works as well. In terms of the alignment of the works, it will be Gill Road to Doran to Finley Mill across the Snow Valley roadway. That's the planned route for the sewer and water lines. For the sewer, sorry. Water lines will be as required from their internal water treatment plant. The last question that Mr. Hanna had was the extension of Forbes Road to Highway 27. Would that be constructed before trucks start rolling? I presume he's referring to the construction trucks. And no, that will not be completed by the start of the construction of the subdivision, which is likely going to commence within a year or so. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Ramdeo. And I do believe we have a question from, perfect. Come on forward. Yes, please. And just state your name and address, please.
Council, my question concerns Floss Road, Concession 8, east of Highway 27. I noticed that part of the road was resurfaced in early May. The part that was done was where the residences in the Sugar Bush are located. I travel that road at least twice a week as we have farms on that road, and I'm at a loss to figure out why that road was resurfaced. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. To add to the mystery, they stopped the resurfacing as soon as they hit the first farm lane. The road there was in the same condition as the stretch of road they resurfaced. There's nothing wrong with it either. I phoned the director of Public Works and was told that in order to hardtop a road, 300 cars per day must be using it. The east section of Floss Road Concession 8 does not have 300 cars per day travel on it, but it was paved, not hardtopped. It was only resurfaced to the end of the residential roads in the Sugar Bush. So one would think that it gets 300 cars per day there, and when they reach the first farm lane, they turn around and go back. It appears to me that there is a very unfair policy in place here. Existing gravel roads will not make 300 cars per day because nobody wants to drive on them. But that being said, many roads that are paved and hardtopped in Springwater don't get 300 cars per day either. What happened to the prioritizing of gravel roads to hardtop conversions that was voted on by the previous councils? When is this council going to treat its taxpayers fairly in regards to road surfacing policy? Residential owners who live on gravel roads pay the same amount of property tax as residential owners do on hard surface roads, and farmers pay more tax when you include their farmland property taxes. Residential homeowners on these unpaved roads also would like the same benefits that are enjoyed by residential owners whose roads are hard surfaced. When can we expect a policy from this township that makes sense and is fair to all? Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can just have you state your name and address for the record.
I'm sorry, Mayor Coggan. I have hearing aids in,
Yeah.
but I cannot hear you.
Mr. Spring, if I can ask you to state your name and address for the record, please.
Oh, my name is John Spring. I live at 2438 County Road 92, Elmville.
And staff will be reaching back out to you with the answers, but I'm going to just turn to GM Ramdeo again to see if he does have anything on the fly, not to put him on the spot, but since you made it all the way down here, we'll see what we can provide to you here. General Manager Ramdeo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to all of council and the gentleman there. Yes, we will reach out to him in terms of the questions. I have spoken to this gentleman before, and I will reach out to him in terms of where we're going and the timing of any works in that area. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Ramdeo. And I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes of council? Councilors Thompson and Deputy Cabral, that the minutes here listed herein be approved as presented. The minutes of the regular meeting of council of June 7th, 2023. Are there any questions on those minutes? And not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the minutes of boards and committees and organizations, Councillor Moore and Garwood, that the minutes of the boards, committees, and organizations listened herein be received for information. And we have the minutes of the Springwater Sports Heritage Board meeting of May 29th, 2023. Are there any questions on those minutes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. Now moving on to number 9, may I have a mover and seconder for the draft council discretionary funds policy? Moved by Deputy Cabral and Councillor Alexander, that the report from the Director of Finance regarding the draft council discretionary funds policy dated June 21st, 2023 be received, and that subject to comments received from council, the policy be finalized and presented to council for approval at a subsequent meeting, and that council provide direction with respect to the options outlined in the report. Option 1, that council direct staff to proceed with the special discretionary operating budget funded annually in the amount of 5,000, including the current 1,000 discretionary fund, and that council remuneration and expense policy be updated accordingly and presented for approval at a subsequent meeting. Or option number 2, a council direct staff to proceed with the special discretionary operational budget funded annually in the amount of 4,000 total, excluding the current 1,000 discretionary fund, and that council remuneration and expense policy be updated accordingly and presented for approval at a subsequent meeting. I will now open up to the floor for comments and questions, and I have Councillor Fisher.
I was just a little bit confused when this was on our agenda. It was my understanding that the parameters around the discretionary spending account were laid out during the budget. So I'm just a little confused as to why we're now seeing options to sort of, I'll say it, constrict it to some extent. So if I get some clarity on that, I'd appreciate it.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Fisher. Based on the budget meetings, the resolution that came out of the February 2nd meeting actually directed staff to create a discretionary funds policy. And in that policy, create a policy that allows council members to even amalgamate funds. So the idea tonight is to provide that draft policy, receive council input, and the idea is to come back based on members of council's comments with a revised and finalized policy. I do believe staff did reach out to specific members of council, and so we didn't receive any specific feedback. So we did work directly with our procurement lawyer to ensure that the township, as well as members of council, were not at any risk or in violation of our current procurement bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Radigan. And I have Councillor Alexander and then Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So with respect to the policy, I did have a couple of concerns in what I think was directed from the discussions at budget. So again, I'd be interested if it's the legal thing, procurement, the two of the different options that were put out, the ones that I had an issue with specifically were with discretionary donation funds not being used for the purchase of township assets, including any items to be owned by the township or installed on township property. I know during the discussions we were discussing basketball nets for Hillsdale, and that was one of the things that we thought funds could be used for. So that was certainly, in my mind, one of the types of things that we would use these funds for. Sorry, I didn't bring my mouse. You're gonna have to bear with me for a second. And then my other. Yeah, let's speak to that one while I find
Director
my other
Radigan?
one. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Alexander. There's a few reasons behind that. The first is, as township staff, we have to look at the bigger picture in terms of assets. So let's say for a Parks and Recreation master plan, we'd want to ensure that it does fall in place or in line with when we do implement a master plan, and the assets work with what the vision is, let's say for the next 5 years or 10 years. A basketball net would not necessarily be a capital asset per se. It wouldn't meet the threshold policy of what a tangible capital asset is of, I believe it was $3,000 in the 2023 budget. So that would be something that, based on option 1 and option 2, the discretionary donation policy would request that a motion or a resolution from all members of council is received prior to approval. Because I believe the current draft policy does recommend a max limit of $1,000. And that is entirely a figure based on discussions with our procurement lawyer. But that is entirely up to council's discretion.
And then our secondary, Counselor Alexander.
Thank you. So I did find my other one, and it actually was that the idea of the maximum amount being $1,000. Again, my thought was that if we had up to $4,000, I could decide that if Hillsdale wants a batting cage or something along those lines, I would be able to take that $4,000 and donate it. Again, I would assume if it is anything on township property, that group is then working with the township to make sure it meets all the regulations needed. But those were the two areas that I did have issue with in the policy that I personally would like to see removed.
And Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. If I were to look at an option, I'd say it would be number 2. I don't view this $4,000 as part of council's remuneration package at all. This is a separate budget line, not for the benefit of councillors, but for the benefit of the community through their councillor. So that would be one thing. And I think when we're talking about the $1,000 threshold, I think that defeats the purpose of having it available, because that would limit you to specific amounts that might not be adequate, which would then place you in a position where you'd have to reach out, not that it would be wrong to do, partner with either another councillor or the mayor or the deputy mayor to assist with that. So that $1,000 cap, I believe, is not and should not be in place. When it comes to capital assets, I also struggle a bit with that. I can think of a number of things, could even be a snow blower or something for the arena that normally might have been purchased through fundraising. And if that were the case, then I think having a capital asset, I can think that staff would have the discretion through their operating budgets to buy certain things. And I know that there's been a number of items that have been purchased over the course of the last few years that I can think of. I'm not going to make mention of them unless you want some examples. I can provide them, but that kind of would put people on the spot that, are just purchased and made assets. So I really struggle with the staff being able to do one thing and then kind of making it so restrictive for councillors to utilize these funds that it's becoming very, very cumbersome. So, and I think in here it also says, as far as the basketballs nets were concerned, as an example, or the batting cage per se, it precludes putting anything on township property. So I think there has to be a mechanism in there that would permit that through consultation with staff. Okay, and the idea of coming back before council for resolution, then we might as well just throw this out the window. And every time I want a basketball, I'll have to make a motion before council, and we'll have to get all the council to decide whether or not that, $150 basketball can be purchased for the local kids. So the idea here was to try and make it a little bit easier to be able to utilize those funds. And a lot of the stuff that's in here is very, very good, but even some of the ones that when we're talking about special interest groups and clubs with exclusive membership. Hey, unless there's an exemption there that says it's okay to do it for Girl Guides, which is a community group that provide community value to a lot of our local areas, that particular section there excludes being able to do that, because that is an exclusive club for girls of a specific age. So policy needs to be able to address that. I mean, it could go as far as to say Knights of Columbus, they have a religious affiliation, but you have to be able to also recognize that they're a service club serving the community. Also, if you're going to be working in conjunction with a school or a school group, there should be opportunity in there to do that. So when we look at these little caveats, let's say, we also have to look at slightly the broader picture and say which groups out there is this going to preclude us working with just by the mere words that are being used in it? Because basically when this policy comes forth and is approved, technically it's going to be law. So That would mean like the Scouts and the Girl Guides, and maybe the local Boy and Girls Club, if we had one locally, we might not be able to utilize these funds for specific things that we would like to do with them or provide to them. So I think it's good that it came forward like this, but I think council should have an opportunity to maybe provide input back to staff now that we've seen the draft policy, to say, here's the things we like. The $1,000 limit, I don't agree with. I think the capital asset piece too, if it's $3,000 is the number and you buy something that's $3,500, for a community usage, it kind of defeats the purpose, because what I'm seeing here is staff can do it, but now council is being told that we cannot. So there needs to be something in there that says, in consultation with staff under these specific guidelines, we're going to make it happen unless there's a real concrete reason why it cannot. The only other, sorry, Mayor Coughlin. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do you want me to get comment on those?
You can comment if you like. I'm just putting points out there. I'm not looking specifically for answers today. I'm just saying these would be some of the things that I would be looking for. Even when we're talking about the section that talks about not being able to use the funds for private events or initiatives not accessible to members of the community. Once again, I step back to guides and scouts and maybe the odd community group that, for no fault of their own, is not generally open to the entire community to participate. So just a bit of an opportunity to open that up just a wee bit. So those are my comments.
Director Radigan?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I absolutely look forward to any additional recommendations or comments that council would like to provide me. I'd be happy to add them or remove them from the report. Thank you.
Additional comments from council, Councillor Fisher?
I just wanted to concur. I think if it's too restrictive, it prevents councillors from doing any sort of meaningful work within their communities. So if it is less restrictive, I think that would be a good input.
Councillor Moore?
Mayor Coughlin, just a quick question. So if this does get then referred back to staff to come back again, I have a request. So then that's going to take some time. I'll have to put a motion forward then this evening, will I, to have an item sort of considered? Or do we chat about that as council, or what would be the policy?
I'm not fully knowing what the direction is, but if
Yeah.
it's just comment so that the next one, when it comes back in draft, has everybody's included in it, I think now's an appropriate time to provide that.
If I have an item though that I want to be considered for from the fund right now.
That would, yes, be a notice of motion.
Okay, so I'll
and then
do
we
that
can-
after. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so we would just need
Sorry, Mayor.
Deputy Cabral.
Sorry, Mayor Coughlin, I'm wondering if it might actually be possible for Councillor Moore to do it. Policy is on the table right now. We're just looking to fine tune it, whether or not council might be in a position to approve or not approve at the present time. If Councillor Moore does want to say, hey, I'd like to spend part of it, this was already approved. So I'm just wondering whether or not council might be in a position to entertain that motion and see where it takes us.
If that's the will of the majority of council, my concern with that is that we don't have the policy created at this time. But if there was an opportunity to have a notice of motion come forward and it was earmarked to come from this at a later date, I don't see why we couldn't get the ball rolling with the project myself. But because we're talking about a policy and not specific items, we're not asking people to basketball net, soccer, shed, whichever. I think we're focusing on the policy. So I was just suggesting that the notice of motion for something, even though this is a source of funding for the notice of motion. Councillor Moore?
Yes, that's fine, Mayor Coughlin. Either way, if the motion comes forward, we'll do it like we used to do it. So I'll just chat about it and have council consider it then.
Councillor Thompson?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor Cabral, my understanding was when you had presented the idea of this fund, that council did not need to approve the purchases, that this was at the discretion of the council members and they could kind of do as they pleased.
Yes, and I will turn to the intent from Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Yes, you're right, Councillor Thompson. However, council did approve the funding. We were looking to fine tune a policy. I was just providing Councillor Moore with an opportunity to bring it forward if council was willing to entertain it. So that's why I brought it forward, just so that it didn't stop dead in its tracks right now, especially if it's time sensitive.
Thank you. And through discussion earlier, I did hear Deputy Cabral wanting to move forward with option 2 as amended with, it's option 2 that you would like to see move forward more so than option 1?
I'm not necessarily saying, as long as this policy is going back to staff to be fine tuned with further council input to come back before us, I'm just saying that option 2, I think, sets this aside from the councillor remuneration package. It's not something that we are spending like that discretionary $1,000 that we keep referring to. That is for us to attend various events and different sessions on behalf and representing Springwater Township. So I just wanted to delineate the two. This is council remuneration package, including that discretionary $1,000. This over here is the community-based council discretionary $4,000 budget line area. Does that work?
And then I'm going to turn to Clerk Ainsworth, who has been taking notes on the different amendments.
Thank you. So based on the discussion, I've drafted the following and somebody would need to propose it. Based on discussion that option 2 be selected and to add to the main motion that the draft policy be amended as follows. Section 5.2 to remove bullet 4 that speaks to purchasing of township assets and bullet 9 that speaks to private events. Section 5.3 removing bullet 1 that speaks to the maximum of $1,000 per recipient. And further that staff provide a less prescriptive section for eligible recipients for council's review to be brought back before council for consideration.
And Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would be happy to table that. However, I would like added in there at the very end that staff entertain council comments before the report comes back again.
And you're just by email directly to
by
Radigan.
email,
Thank you.
or by phone.
Yes, sorry, but directly to Director.
Yes, to Director Radigan.
And council, can I have a seconder for that, please? And I have Councillor Moore. And this is voting on the amendment. So I will, do we want Clerk Ainsworth to read it again, or is she captured, I think, what the conversation was here? We're satisfied with that. So council, all those in favor of the amendment? And that has carried. And now council, we're moving back to the main motion as amended. So we are moving forward with option 2 as amended. And I had a mover and seconder for that, which was Cabral and Alexander. So I have Cabral and Alexander. Is there any other comments or questions at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. All right. We are now moving on to our charging stations. May I have a mover and seconder for the EV charging stations potential subsidy and installation locations? I have Councillors Fisher and Garwood. That the report from the General Manager of Infrastructure Operational Services regarding EV charging stations potential subsidy and installation locations dated June 21st, 2023 be received, and that council provide direction with respects to option 1 or option 2 as listed below. Option 1, that council provide the project to install a total of 5 level 2 electric vehicle charging stations, including 2 at the admin center and 1 at each of its yards 1, 2, and 3. That council approved the total project and the cost of $100,000 for the township's net cost of up to $50,000 to be funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve. That the General Manager of Infrastructure and Operational Services be authorized to submit the application to the Green Economy of Canada funding program. Or option 2, that council provide that the project to install a total of 7 level 2 electric vehicle charging stations, including 2 at the administration center, 1 at each of the yards 1, 2, and 3, and 1 at the Elmdale Arena and 1 at the community center. That the successful with the potential subsidy application, that council approved the project at the total cost of $140,000 of the township's net costs up to 70,000 to be funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve, and that the general manager of infrastructure and operational services be authorized to submit the application to the Green Economy Canada funding program. Council, open it up now for conversation, questions, comments. I'll go to Councilors Thompson and Fisher.
Through the chair to GE or General Manager Ramdale, are these charging stations for our vehicles or township vehicles or employee vehicles?
General Manager Ramdale.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin to Councillor Thompson. At this point in time, it's intended to be for township vehicles. Having said that, the software allows for us to expand the usage as we would decide.
Along, Councillor Thompson.
And through the chair to General Manager Ramdale, how many electrical vehicles do we currently own?
GM Ramdale.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin to Councillor Thompson. At this point in time, we do not own any electric vehicles.
Okay, and I do have Fisher and Alexander, and before I do move on to those, if I could have maybe go to CEO Schmidt to speak to the purpose and effect of the report, because I do believe that this was a direction from previous council. This is it makes it interesting to me that we're receiving a staff report on something that isn't, in my opinion, an identified need within. So if we can speak to why this report is before this council. I do believe that it was a notice of motion from previous council.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to members of council, that's correct. Previous member of council brought forward a notice of motion, previous term of council, requesting that essentially staff investigate the option of installing EV charging stations at the admin center as well as at our work shards. And further to that, obviously staff is responding via this staff report for council's consideration. Why it's presented the way it is tonight is, again, there's a funding opportunity that's available should council wish to pursue that. That said, yes, we do not have any electric vehicles for the township yet. That may change in the future. I think I will also indicate that, council may be aware, or I'll remind you, I guess, that through the community-based strategic plan that was just approved in April, this is part of one of the actions is to look at charging stations, as well as through our climate action plan that we're working with Severn Sound Environmental Association. This could be one of the initiatives that could be provided for in that action plan. With all that being said, the community-based strategic plan and the climate action plan are not something that will need to be done tomorrow. So there is an opportunity for the township to consider moving forward with these charging stations at a future date, assuming funding programs are available, which they likely will be available in the future. I can't predict that, but based on what we've seen to date, there likely will be additional funding opportunities in the future. But again, staff was of the opinion that through their research, they did find opportunities whereby if council wanted to consider possibly moving forward, here's an opportunity to do so. But we're in council's hands as to how you wish to proceed tonight.
Thank you, CEO Schmidt. I'll go back to Councillor Fisher.
Where I do believe that electric vehicles do hold a place in our future, I definitely cannot support either option one or option two for a few different reasons. One is discussed. We don't have one electrical vehicle in our fleet. As a matter of fact, we have two hybrid vehicles that were recently acquired, but they are non-plug-in, so they will never be able to be plugged in. Even if we do acquire EVs, I believe that we should be dealing with a number of this magnitude inside of the budget. Another thing to consider is technicians for electrical vehicles are highly specialized, right? And we have two mechanics in Springwater right now. I doubt very much they're specialized in that, but even the specialized equipment that comes with dealing with the maintenance in-house is far more costly. We'd even have to end up sending those out. And in terms of the costs, I can tell you this, I've done quite a bit of research on this, and $20,000 roughly per charging station. I talked to Tesla and they're $475 with an estimated $750 to $1,500 install. It's $2,000 for a level 2 charger. Ford has $799. Hyundai has a few different chargers, but you can have them installed for under $3,000. As a matter of fact, Reliance will come and install one in your home. I'm not seeing $20,000, but these are all level 2 chargers. A quick search on the internet will bring you name brand level 2 chargers under $1,000 pre-install. So I really do question the $20,000. Also, when I look at the program here and read it, the township, the way I read this, if approved, the township will pay the full cost of the project, then submit the invoices for reimbursement of 50% of the costs. And then it later says, should Green Economy approve the partial subsidy? So it seems to me like we're fronting 100% of taxpayers' dollars towards this, up to $100,000 or even $140,000, but we're not even guaranteed to get the money. So I do question it. I question the price. I question whether or not we need it. And I even question the program itself. And I'm sure these programs will be around in the future. Thank you.
I did have Counselor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So yeah, I had a couple of concerns with this, and I actually sit on the Severn Sound and SSEA Climate Action Plan. I think there are many other opportunities for us to provide meaningful change in the township with respect to environmental concerns. I feel like this is a bit of the cart before the horse. We have no vehicles. It's a lot of money for the stations. Even if we were to get vehicles, I'm not sure we need 5 to 7 different charging stations. And I question of, if they're not for us, if we're providing them for the rest of the residents in the township, one, how many people actually have electric vehicles in Springwater Township, if we have any idea of that. And I don't know if it's necessarily the municipality's role to provide charging stations for these people. We're not in the business of gas stations. I'm not sure this is the business we should be in either.
And while this conversation is great, if there is a deferral that would like to be tabled, we can defer this back, or we can not vote on it and let it pass, defeat it and have it not come back. It's completely up to council. And I do have, Cabral did have his hand up, and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just thoughts on it. I think electric vehicles are good. I think township taking advantage of it at some point in time would fall quite nicely in with the strategic plan, as well as climate initiatives that, you know, were spoken of at and during that period. However, a few comments would be, it's my way of thinking. I mean, really, it's premature. However, I do want to point out that, and it's no reflection on anyone, but previous council did bring this forward and ask for it. I think at that time there was also discussion about electric vehicles. However, that does place an obligation on members of staff to come back before council, whether they want to or not. It doesn't alleviate them of the obligation to bring back a report. So I totally understand where this is coming from, and it was maybe an opportune time because of that. I'm only going to say a few points, like stockpiling diesel fuel, because you might buy a diesel truck down the road. So it doesn't work for me that way. If it was being done, it should coincide with actual EV purchases that township is looking to make. And in addition to that, prior to the EV purchases being made or EV stations being looked at, it should be based on employee work position needs. And I'm just going to use an example of building inspector versus patroller. EV vehicle for a patroller. Doubtful it would work, but if it did work, that patroller's vehicle would have to be charged up very quickly so that it would be available for other uses. However, building inspector probably could get away with an EV depending on what their runs were off and on through the day. And it doesn't need a level 3 or a level 2 charger, because it's going to be parked here likely for 12 hours at least before the next shift comes on the next day. It might sit there all weekend long too. So I think before we even move to it, we would likely want to look at what vehicles would be appropriate for the township, given the range that they can provide. And then again, how long are they going to sit idle to decide on what level charges would be required for those vehicles, rather than spend $5,000 for a level 3 supercharger? Maybe we can get by with one a little bit cheaper. So at the present time, I wouldn't be able to support this, but certainly come the future, I think I could.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I was just going to say the same in the sense that the original motion that Councillor Ritchie had put forward was because we were or at least adding or asking during the budget time to look at electric vehicles. So it made sense at the time. But now situation has changed. They ended up with hybrid vehicles instead of electric vehicles. And so I would agree that this can come back down the road, but I wouldn't support it right now.
And just for council and for myself, if we defer this motion, so this exact resolution would come back to council. If council wanted to at another time present something that's maybe more relevant to what type of vehicles or what we're doing, we could simply defeat this motion and then move forward through budget at a different time. But if we want to see this exact motion come back before us, it would be a deferral. Deputy Cabral.
Just a quick comment on that. I would prefer to see something come back through the budgetary process that would define which EV chargers were going to be proposed and which EV vehicles were being proposed and background data to that. So deferring this really to me does not make any sense. I think if we're going to move on an option, suggest an option and let council decide whether it lives or dies.
Councillor Fisher.
I was just going to say the same thing. I would like to see it defeated, because frankly, I don't see the numbers being relevant. So thank you.
And council, at this time, if there's no further discussion, I can call the vote. All those in favor? Sorry, we'll move option 1, or I don't need to, sorry, of the motion that's before us. And then if you don't raise your hand, this is defeated. Right. So council, all those in favor? And seeing none, this motion has lost. And council, we are now moving on to our action reports. And may I have a mover and seconder to get these on the floor for consideration? I have councillors Garwood and Thompson that I will read through them all and we can pull them accordingly. That action reports 10.2 through 10.6 be received and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. We have 10.2, our budget and business plan, our unaudited year-end results as of December 31st, 2022. 10.3, our 2023 development charges background study and bylaw. 10.4, our lease renewal at 6 Yonge Street South in Elmville. 10.5, which is our Springwater Development Corporation at 1256 Wilson Drive. We have 10.6, a lift hold application for First Elms Holding. We did receive information that 10.2 has been pulled. Are there any additional items to be pulled? And is there any comments on the remaining 10.3 through 10.6? And seeing none, council, we will vote on as this is. So we would be voting on 10.3 through 10.6. And I still need to say with the exclusion of 10.2. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to our budget business plan. May I have a mover and seconded for this pulled item? Deputy Cabral and Councillor Garwood. That the report from the Director of Finance regarding the budget and business plan unaudited year and results as December 31st, 2022, dated June 21st, 2023 be received, and that the 2022 tax-based operating surplus be allocated as following. That 40,484 to the Library Capital Discretionary Fund, 508,501 to the Township Unfunded Capital, and 1.413453 or remaining audited balance be allocated to a new reserve to mitigate the impacts of Bill 23. And that council authorized the creation of the Bill 23 reserve to assist with the future impact of development charges. And at this time, I'll open the floor to the mover, Deputy Cabral, and then to Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. This caught my attention because I did receive information from a resident regarding a stretch of roadway that surprisingly enough was spoken about earlier today. And that stretch of roadway is Floss Road 8 East, the baseline area there through the Sugar Bush area. And at that time, I looked all over the place in the capital budget for 2023, the approved budget for 2023, to see where on earth this road all of a sudden miraculously got paved because I couldn't recall it being in there. So I ended up saying, hey, I can't find this. And then this agenda comes out, and when I'm reading through the agenda, I look at Appendix D, and in Appendix D, I find that there is a item, I think the project number is 2027-16 for Floss Road 8 East. Yep, 2027-16. And for pretty near, I guess, a couple of $100,000. So my question is this: we go back to February. There's a budget presented to us. Council approves that budget for 2023. And then all of a sudden, miraculously, there's a project worth over $170,000 from 2027 that is brought forward and a roadway gets paved. Now, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I certainly didn't approve that. I didn't say that I wanted to see those funds spent this year or that road completed this year. So I'm kind of a little bit flabbergasted because I'll be honest with you, this just doesn't sit right with me. And I have to ask myself, why that particular stretch of roadway? Why not one of the roads that were gravel that have been pushed off into the future for hardtop conversion? Why wasn't one of those brought down? And then there's also a letter to council from a Midhurst resident asking about Findlay Mills Road. And I thought to myself, that can't be that big a deal. But you know what? I drove Findlay Mills Road from Doran, and they're absolutely right. It's horrendous when you get down to Wattie. So I guess my question is, how does that happen when council decides that they're going to have a budget for 2023, and then a staff member or staff, and I don't know if there's any other projects that have been pulled forward either, take it upon themselves to arbitrarily move a project from 2027 to 2023 and have it done? I want to know how that happened. That's what I would like to know, because in my mind, this council certainly did not approve that to happen. And we had Mr. Spring sitting here talking about the exact same thing. So that's my question. I want to know how that happened.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coggin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I will start and try and maybe defer to our Director Radigan. Based on my understanding here, it appears that Appendix D is reporting on the 2022 capital status. And from what I can tell here, project number 2027-16, Floss Road 8 East, 1589 west of baseline. The baseline moved to 2021 as per the 2020 roads needs study. So it appears that in the 2022 capital budget, 2021 budget, capital budget, $170,000 was approved. Those dollars were carried forward to the 2022 capital budget, and that project was moved forward because of that. So funds were approved through the capital budget, from what I can understand.
And so for clarification, the project number didn't change.
Correct.
Just as if something gets deferred, if it was 2015 and it's done in 2025, it still says 2015 on that. And I'm going to go, Deputy Cabral did want a follow-on, and then I have Fisher and then Alexander.
Thank you. And if that's the case, then I do stand to be corrected. However, I have in the past noted that when projects are put in there that have been deferred, they usually are reflected in the same year that they're going to be done. So that project, in my way and in my mind, whether the funds were carried forward or not, should have been alluded to in the budget, that those funds had been carried forward and that was going to be accomplished this year. And I still have to ask myself, why that particular project? And are there any other projects that are being pulled down from future years to be completed this year?
I don't know if I would have to go to GM Ramdale for that, or if Director Radigan, if you can speak to, CEO Schmidt's waving here.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. Again, I'll start and defer to Director Radigan if possible. So typically, Deputy Mayor and members of council, when we bring forward our capital budget on an annual basis, so if there's funds or projects that aren't completed in, say, 2023 for a 2024 capital budget, if you will, those projects typically will come forward and staff will suggest that those dollars be carried forward to 2024 in order for those projects to proceed in 2024. So this is what I believe what happened is there was likely some discussion during the 2021 budget, because as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, the project number 2027 typically represents the year in which the project appears in the capital budget. However, through discussions and or through amendments, and it does say in the description moved to 2021 and in brackets 2020 RNS, which is the 2020 roads need study. So I assume based on discussions, based on when staff brought forward this initiative, they decided or they proposed to move it to 2021 based on the roads need study. Those dollars would have been put in the capital budget, or they ought to have been put in the capital budget, which I think they have, and that would show in a carry forward column. So typically, if you even look at our 2023 capital budget, there's a column for carry forward dollars that came from 2022, then new dollars that are being requested in 2023 for a total budget of whatever those two numbers add up to. And that's typically the dollars that get approved and move forward in the year. So those projects do get to go forward. So again, that's the process, and council approves that process or approves those projects as part of the budget deliberations.
CEO Schmidt. Director Radigan, was there anything additional to add?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I just wanted to reiterate that what CEO Schmidt has stated is accurate. I do know that with the new GM general manager, as well as some of the new staff in place, some of the items have been tendered as group lump sums. And so some projects have been delayed. So a lot of the tendering is taking place, but the actual construction is not taking place until potentially the following year. So that is partially the reason for some of the delays that you will see. So, but most of the projects should have been captured as part of the 2023 budget as part of carry forward. The idea is those funds were committed, and most likely staff are anticipating moving forward on them, such as already tendering them. So that's the idea of why the project was completed probably in 2023.
I'm going to go to Deputy Cabral and then back to Fisher and Alexander.
All right, thank you. If that's the case, then I stand to be corrected. However, is it an oversight that it wasn't included in that formula in the 2023 budget? Because I looked for it and it was not there. If there was additional funds allocated to it, if they were there, I don't know where they were hiding. So that's why this has caught me off guard. Thank you.
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. You are correct. I believe that would be 100% an oversight. So usually when I'll come back with a Q1 or Q2 results, you'll see a similar format that you see in Appendix D today. And at the bottom of that, you would see items that were not included in the budget, but would have come forward either from a previous budget or from reports that were approved through council, such as you see in this report here today. There were items that were approved through the OSIF funding that were not approved inside the budget process. And there are other items that were just approved outside the budget. So the idea is it'll still be tracked. It just may not be included as part of the overall approved budget number, but those funds are still existing and committed towards specific projects. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
I guess this question would be for Mr. Romdeo. I guess I just question the methodology behind choosing these roads. You know, by all accounts, the road that in question was in good condition, yet it was repaved. Yet Finley Mill in Ward 5 is in bad condition. It's been that way for about 5 years, and we're looking at doing it when the developer comes in. Carson Road in Ward 4, we hear about it on a monthly basis or more. I'm sure it's falling apart daily with no end in sight. And if I remember correctly, I think it was Victoria Road we talked about and didn't move ahead with it during the budget. So I guess my question is, how come some of these roads that don't seem to need attention get it, and the ones that see heavy traffic, actually in the case of Finley Mill and Carson Road, are not receiving it? And really, with no foreseeable end in sight as far as I can see. That'd be my question.
GM Ramdale?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Fisher. The decision to choose which roads to be rehabilitated, and I'll address Finley Mill, I'll speak in general terms first, is based upon the road needs study. The road needs study assesses the condition of the road, the structural integrity of the road, and weighs the cost of repairing, pothole patching, likewise, protecting the structural aspect, and comes up with a number. And that number can range anywhere from 0 to 10, 10 being good, 0 being very bad. The road in question in 2020 was rated a 6. And in the process that we've been going through in the last 2 years, have been going to all of the ones that were rated lower to get to them before the structure below fails completely and we have to rebuild. So it's more of a preventative maintenance aspect to resurface as opposed to rebuilding later at much higher cost. So that's how this was, this particular one, Floss 8, was rated a 6 out of 10, which puts it towards the bottom of our roadways. Finley Mill and Carson. Finley Mill will be completely, there'll be large excavations on Finley Mill once a developer comes through, which likely will begin later this year and next year. If we were to do any major work on Finley Mill today, that work would be ripped up by the developer as they come through with their work. So there is a plan. What we are doing is really just maintaining to go to the point until the developer comes in. Once the developer finishes their work, they're responsible for rebuilding Finley Mill to what is required for the future as opposed to today, which includes the sidewalks and the other aspects. Carson Road this year will be repaved by the developer from their site to Wilson. So that's being done. In the future, that developer for Mix will rebuild Carson Road. I hope that answers your questions.
And Councillor Fisher for follow-on, and then I have Alexander, Moore, and back to Cabral.
Just follow on for Mr. Ramdale. So in terms of Finley Mill, you said the developer would rip it up. Is this when you're talking about ripping it up? Is it during the sewage installations? Can you tell me? Because I was under the impression they would be boring underneath.
GM Ramdale?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Fisher. Yes, the plan is for drilling under the roadway. As part of that drilling, however, they will need access to various locations. Drilling is straight. So every time there's a turn, there needs to be an access point. That access point is very large. So there will be significant work in those locations, plus the construction traffic that's coming through for that boring work, the large trucks and likewise.
Councillor Fisher?
Just to follow on, so would it be then accurate to say if we were to repair, I'm just talking about Finley Mill here, if we were to repair Finley Mill in the place that it needs it at Waddy, so a small section of it, if we were to repair it now, the chances of impeding the developer's boring would be, I would think, little to none. Would it be possible to move that project up?
GM Ramdale?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Fisher. That would be, if it is the will of the council to move that project, of course we could. At that location, that developer does have a fair bit of work to do, so likely will impact that repaired section in the future, in the near future.
Thank you. I have Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I do think at a later date, because it's probably not the point right now, I do think we do need to take a look at our roads assessments and how we determine these roads, because roads that are considered a 6 versus, I believe Victoria was a 9. And anybody who has driven down there, I think would have a very large argument against that. But that I do believe is potentially something we need to bring up at a later date. With respect to this specific one, I feel that there is definitely, and whether it was, I'm not saying it was purposeful, a lack of transparency. I know in terms of the budget, when we went through, Buckley Street was on there as a carry forward. I read that, like it's on there with, and it was like $60,000, and it was coming from the year before, 2 years before when it's been approved. So I don't know how we are then missing $170,000 one. Either they're there or they're not, in my mind, you're carry forward. So again, not saying it's intentional, but I think in terms of transparency, if we're carrying something forward, we need to know that, especially as a new council, because we don't know what was approved before us. So that's just my comment.
Counselor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. It is difficult, and I'll direct my question, if I may, through you to General Manager Ramdeo. It is difficult when the road needs study is 2020 and we're 2023 and just an incredible amount of development. So I don't think the roads needs study would have included or anticipated what the development damage would be to our roads. Carson Road in particular, if you could just clarify for me, you said from the site to Wilson Road. Well, Wilson Road right now, where the roundabout is completely under construction. So does the county, I guess they'll just pave a certain part back down toward the developer's site. But that's a very, very, very small section of Carson Road. The entire road down to Bayfield Street is a disaster. But I think that saying that, I believe we were in the same position for Dobson Road North. And I think CEO Schmidt, you would agree, like there's a developer agreement there as well. But it is taking a long time, like these developments, you know, people live in these horrible road situations for a long time while these developments occur. It's really unfair. I think that we really should be looking at mitigating the impacts to our residents in between or halfway through or something. Instead of 5 years, they have to try and live with this. It's not just the people that live there. Those are really busy and well-traveled roads. So looking for comment about the road needs study and how do we then incorporate what's actually happening now? When is the next one being done?
I will go to GM Ramdeo for our 2020, the next update to our 2020 study.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Moore. Our next road needs study will actually be in 2023. We have gone through the process of advertising for a consultant to do that. And likely on the next council, that report will be up to award that on that council agenda. So we will be repeating it in 2023, and that will update the study to capture the impacts of the increased traffic that we're seeing.
Thank you, GM Ramdeo, for that. Also, I think it's important that prior to our next budget, November, whenever that starts, sometime in October, or sorry, late September, early October, if council could have an information session on just our roads need studies. I think that when people see potholes or they see shoulders deteriorating, they think if that one's got the most potholes, that's the worst road in Springwater, but sometimes it's base work that needs to be done. There's a lot more that meets the eye, I would think. So I think it might be good for us to, even for us to fully understand how the roads are identified, and maybe so that when we do go into budget, it's not, you know, picking and choosing which roads need to be done. We can hopefully approve a plan and keep that plan and have a plan that we support moving forward. I did have Deputy Cabral again.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I still got to step back to the 10th. I mean, the road needs study was in 2020, yet that road was assigned a project number which would denote 2027. So I still, whether it was a 6 or not, I recall Floss Road 10 West going to be resurfaced from 93 down to the pit. I don't even know if it's still on the radar anymore. And that was something that back in the previous council session was going to be a road that was in dire need of work. So I still wonder about one from 2027, because there might have been other ones that were 6s that could have come up as well. But one thing I do want to point out is when it comes to gravel roadways and being rated an 8, I think it's too convenient to say that the gravel road was an 8, because the following week, if it rains and traffic gets on it, and I know that from my own road, it could deteriorate with potholes and require grading very, very quickly. So I think our gravel roads, when they're rated, really should be followed and looked at not particularly the dead end portions, but certainly the well-traveled ones. And the reason I'm saying this is there was a high reluctance to hardtop Floss Road 10 West. And at that time, it was, well, you know, you don't meet the numbers, and there was a lot of rhetoric about that. However, I can tell you right now that that road there will certainly support 300 cars a day. A substantial amount of heavy truck traffic, including tractor trailers, is diverted regularly from Elmvale, having to negotiate the turn at 92. So is there an advantage to paving a road? Yes, I believe there is, especially if they are roads that commuters will use as an alternative to driving down the main street of Elmvale. And the only reason I point that out is because we have spoken in the past about paving Floss Road 8 from Crosland Road down to Vigo. And I would suggest that if that were done, it would once again, there would be a lot of traffic that would no longer navigate through the main street of Elmvale, which we used to get a substantial number of complaints for the heavy trucks that were going down Queen Street West. And I'm just saying that there are other advantages to paving the gravel roads than merely putting down hardtop. And I guess that's the point I wanted to make, is that I think it's unfair when we do the road needs study, if it's been good weather for a week and the gravel roads are in good shape because they've been recently graded. It's not like a paved road that deteriorates in over time, over a number of years, and then all of a sudden gets a low rating. Gravel road could be great today, and 3 weeks down the road be an utter mess. So I think for the gravel to hardtop conversions, I really think we need to kind of start moving in that direction again. Because there are benefits to doing it, and outside of the maintenance benefits, cost a lot more to take a grader to a gravel road to grade potholes out 5 or 6 times a year, or even more if need be, and the folks are calling for it, than it does once that road has been hard topped. And our consultants in the past have clearly indicated that. So I just want to point out that I think when it comes to our roads and infrastructure, a road needs study is fine, but we need to get our own roads people, in particular, possibly the ones that are seeing our gravel roads deteriorate, to start making notations there and keeping track of that so that we can actually say, hey, maybe we should pave this road or hard top it because it's costing us a fortune. Keep sending the grader there.
And Councillor Fisher.
I just want to circle the wagons and speak to those residents who do live and have to put up with the developments. You know, we constantly tell them, and I've told them for years, that their roads are going to be redone. And I get the logic behind the delay, but at a certain point, there is a tipping point, and those roads, they are decayed. You know, they have gone too far. I can speak as a councillor in an area that is experiencing the development. You know, we're telling those people one more year, we're pushing them off, but I think many of them are experiencing, well, frankly, they're paying the price, and they are the present day taxpayers, and they're paying the price for the development going through. And in many cases, I think these roads will be repaired in, we say the next year, but you know, some of them, one fellow approached me and he's been waiting 5 years for certain repairs to be made. So I think there needs to be a certain level of advocacy for these people who are experiencing the development long before a house is even built and long before their roads are even repaired.
Not seeing any hands. I do have the resolution before us. If there's anything you proposed, just comments. Oh, Councillor Alexander.
Oh, yeah, sorry, we got off on a tangent there. A good conversation. So I do, with respect to the operating surplus allocation, I would like to see some sort of further breakdown, potentially, Director Radigan, if you can, of the 40,000 plus library capital discretionary reserve fund. I'm struggling with this one a bit, in that when I was reading it, it talks about utilities and different areas of savings, which is great, But then I'm also in that report reading how the arena had it, these areas of savings. And like some of the community halls did, and we don't have discretionary funds for these organizations or facilities. It kind of all goes into a general pot and we pull back. So I would, if you could provide a bit of a further breakdown, I would appreciate that.
Director Radigan?
Thank you, Mayor Cogman, through you to Councillor Alexander. I have been working directly with CEO Delgado to dive deeper into the surplus. What we're trying to determine is what are library generated funds, for example, fundraising or donations versus what are funds that are taxpayer funds that should potentially go to a different area. Ideally, the Library Capital Discretionary Reserve Fund is used for assets that are owned and operated by the township. We do have the 3 buildings, and so there is capital and there's furniture and equipment there. There's items that will need replacement, and the Library Capital Reserve Fund is the funding source for that. But we are working towards providing a deeper detailed dollar value to council in terms of what are specific funds that are raised specifically for library purposes versus township dollars.
I have Councillor Thompson, I have comment, and Councillor Fisher.
Through the chair to CEO Delgado, I understand some of those excess funds too are from the grant that was carried over from 2022, that these funds are allocated to our portion of the grant and they just haven't been spent yet, but will be spent this year.
I'm going to go to Director Radigan for that.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Councillor Thompson. Usually through the year-end process, we do review all the grants and ensure that funds towards those grants are spent towards the allocated grant allocations. And when we do reach out to the library, we defer funds if they are unspent as per the grant. And this year we did not receive any communication to defer any grant dollars. So hence why grant funding was 100% utilized in 2022.
Thank you, Director Radigan. And I do have a question, and I do apologize for not coming to your office before, but creating another reserve, what is the advantage to a council to have a specific reserve set aside for this bill, that Bill 23? And why not just put it into a general reserve or a tax stabilization reserve and allow council to have the discretion as to what we would do with that at budget time?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to members of council. That is a great question. I'm definitely not someone who enjoys creating several reserves. It does create more of an administrative nightmare, but this one is specific to Bill 23. The item on the agenda 10.3 does refer to the amount of loss that we are going to see as a result of development charges. And right now, although we are approving a 2023 background study and a new development charge fee, that fee will actually be lower than our current fee today. Those dollars are lost, and the only way to collect them are most likely taxpayers or other user fees. So the fee currently is around 18,000. The recommended fee is in the 21,000s. With the mandated phase-in, we can only collect 80% of that $21,000. The increase from the current rate to the new rate is only 13%. So we're automatically seeing a loss. And year 2, we can only collect 85%. Year 3, we can collect 90%. And we don't get to the current dollar value, at least until year 3. And the projected loss based on the agenda item 10.3 is about 8.5 million in those 5 years, just as a result of the mandatory phase-in. The second loss is a result of the mandatory exemption for non-for-profit. We haven't had any non-for-profits currently, but we do have one potentially in the future, the Elmville Seniors Active Association, which I believe there are 240 units being proposed. And if that development does prove to be non-for-profit, there would be no DC charges collected. And that would be an additional loss of 3.2 million in the 5 years. So this is a major loss that the township will be facing. And it is almost starting immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I did have Counselor Fisher and then
As it pertains to the $40,484 for the library capital discretionary reserve, they've ran surpluses back to 2016 and presently have $181,000 in the account. It's my understanding, although we don't have the full figures as to what comes from fundraising and what is tax dollars, but it seems to me, and I'll direct this question to Director Radigan, that the vast majority of that $40,000 is tax dollars. And I would propose that we keep it back and put it in reserve fund.
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Fisher. I don't wish to speculate, but yes, the majority, I would agree, is taxpayer dollars, but there are funds that were fundraised by the library that should go towards those library initiatives. Sorry, thank you.
Following Councillor Fisher.
So just to confirm, Director Radigan, the majority or vast majority of that $40,000 would be taxpayers' dollars, but a small portion would be from fundraising from the library, correct?
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Fisher. I would say that there is a majority would be taxpayer there, but there are funds that are fundraised specifically for the library that should be allocated to the library.
Councillor, I did say Deputy Cabral, and then I have Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just in respect of C, the $1.4 million remaining audited balance to be allocated to a new reserve to mitigate the impacts of Bill 23. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a supporter of that. These are tax dollars that were already generated. In my opinion, if any of these tax dollars are going to be held back, they should go into general reserves, because from there they can be used for whatever purposes. If we're going to lose money, we're going to lose money. We're already tied into the community hub, and I would actually like to propose, because this used to fall under the auspices of the Audit and Finance Committee that would make recommendation to council. And I'm not trying to say anything about anything other than the fact that when the Audit and Finance Committee was dissolved, the idea was that this group of people, council as a whole, was going to decide what was going to happen. And no slight to the recommendation, but I don't see how creating one for DCs with taxpayer dollars that have already come in. I feel that any taxpayer dollars should go into the general reserve fund to be used for whatever purposes that this township deems they're necessary for. And if we're taking a hit, we're taking a hit. Like, if that's the way it's going to be, I believe that that's just the way it's going to happen. We do know that the community hub is coming online. We've heard some of the numbers. I would like to propose an amendment right now that half of this money, the available balance, goes into the community hub reserve fund, and the other half goes into the general reserve fund. That's what I would like to propose as far as line number C is. So I'm proposing an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have an amendment on the floor. Councillor Thompson, I will get to you. I have an amendment, so I just need a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Fisher. And so the amendment from, do you want to read that out? And if there's any discussion from council, we're open to the discussion. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and just, yes, so that was Councillor Fisher. Sorry, just the microphone. He just asked if it was C and we said yes, so we don't really need to repeat it, but so we can come back to item A. And again, I think that this is our opportunity to really dive in and, like you said, decide where we want this money allocated. But we did have a motion put on the floor, so we do need to address that first. So And it's directed straight in half is what you want?
Yeah, half was good,
Perfect.
I think.
And about the amendment? Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. To Director Radigan, when we're looking at what is the plan to pay for the community hub? Is it out of development charges or is it we're just, I don't know how we're miraculously coming up with a large number of dollars it's going to cost for it. So I'm just kind of interested in how that proposed.
Director Radigan?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Alexander. That is correct. It is 61% development charge funded, which at this point in time, that 61% is more like a 50%. And the remainder would be debenture funded, which would be the carrying costs being charged to taxation.
Council, we do have. Do you have a recommendation? All right, Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. Just to Director Radigan, if I may, the official name of the general reserve and also the community hub reserve, please.
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Clerk Ainsworth, that I would recommend the general reserve would be the tax rate stabilization reserve. And I am just opening up the reserves, so just 1 second, and I will provide the other name.
Councillor Moore.
Mayor Coughlin. The library capital discretionary reserve fund. When we look at the library becoming part of the community hub, is there a portion though of that reserve that will be used for the community hub?
And I will give Director Radigan a minute with that one. And then I do feel that we need to deal with the amendment before we move on back up to item A. You ready? Oh, Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The reserve for the community hub would be the recreation facility reserve.
And council would not, I don't believe I need to read it out. So Deputy Cabral has put a motion forward to take item C, divide it in half and put it half into our tax rate stabilization or general reserve and the remaining half into our recreational facility reserve. And also that we would delete that council authorized the
Yes.
creation and we delete, so we don't need to create a reserve we're not putting anything into. So that is now before us, council. We have it moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that has carried. And we are now back to the main motion, and Councillor Moore did have a question about item A again. Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Moore, the community hub with the addition of a library would be funded a portion with DC Library from the DC Library Reserve Fund. And then the other portion is considered to be debt funded. So we have not allocated any funds from the library discretionary reserve fund specifically. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair to Director Radigan. So my understanding, some of these funds from the $40,000 excess this year are from fundraising from the volunteers, the Friends of the Library. I think it would be highly disrespectful to them just to take those funds and to stick them in a tax account. Why don't we know how much that is?
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Thompson. I do know the fundraising dollar value. However, I do not know what those funds were raised for. And as a result, I would assume there would be expenses associated with them. And I do not have that figure because I'm still working with CEO Delgado to determine where the expenses are in terms of they could be in several line items. So the idea is if you're fundraising for a cause, you would have an expenditure item related to it. So just trying to nail down an accurate figure to provide to council. Thank you.
And I know that the CFO or the financial people of the world don't like ballparks, but is it 90% of the 40, or are we talking $3,000 here? I'm just curious as to what magnitude the fundraising is. CAO Schmidt.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to members of council, if I may, can council consider deferring that portion and having staff report back with an accurate number as opposed to speculating at this time?
Absolutely. We don't want, I'm in full support of removing or deferring item A and carrying on with that, because I'm not suggesting that we ballpark everything. I'm just saying if we were going to continue to move forward, I would like to do that. So if I could have a motion to defer brought forward, or no, is this comment or defer?
Just to follow up, is there any penalty to our township in deferring this?
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Thompson. No, there would be no penalty whatsoever. We can allocate those funds and hold off. The idea was to ensure we just had an idea for our auditors so we can come forward with our final audit figures. Thanks.
And I have Councillor Fisher moving the deferral, and I just need a seconder. I have Councillor Garwood for that, and we're going to take item A, and we are putting forward a motion to defer. Council, all in favor? And item A has been deferred. Are we comfortable to move back to the main motion as amended? Or is there any further discussion on item B and then C as amended? And seeing none, council, all those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you. There's the information reports. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the information reports, please? I have Councillor Garwood and Moore, that the reports listed therein be received for information. I do have item 4 pulled. Item 1 is the bylaw service monthly report. Item 2 is the building service monthly report. Item 3 is the 2023 Doors Open Simcoe event, and item 4 has been pulled to be dealt with separately. Is there any questions or comments or additional pulls from 1, 2, or 3? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to item 4, which I have separately. It's not separately. So we will have item 4. I need a mover and seconder to have that back up. And I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Garwood. And we'll now move on to our school guard crossing assessment report. And Deputy Cabral. So the 10-2 was pulled, 10-4 was dealt with in our consent agenda. So we are now on to 11, and 11 item 11-4 was pulled, which was the school crossing guard assessment report. Back to Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. In reading the report, it provided the assessment. It also provided the results. And in respect of that report, I think something should be tabled to have staff directed to follow the assessment tool that the report dictated. And I would ask that Clerk Ainsworth either read or let me read, whatever works easiest, because it did speak to crossing guard assessments throughout the course of this school year, and it also alluded to the fact that there were no crossing guard sites that met the threshold for crossing guard.
Thank you. And Clerk Ainsworth. Yes, thank you. Oh, sorry, just that mic.
Thank you. And the amendment would read, whereas a warrant assessment of various locations around the township was conducted in accordance with the school crossing guard policy, program policy. And whereas the data showed that no crossing guards are warranted at any locations within the township, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to follow policy and discontinue any assessed school crossing guard locations not meeting the school crossing guard warrant criteria as of the end of the 22-23 school year, and further that notice of the removal be provided in accordance with the policy.
And I need a seconder for that, please. I have Counselor Garwood. Counselor, is there any further discussion? I know this is something that we've discussed heavily in the past, so I do thank staff for bringing this to fruition and putting this before us. I do have Counselor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Really more of a comment at this point. I completely agree with the deputy mayor. While I would, in a perfect world, love to see crossing guards in many of our communities with schools, at the end of the day, none of them warrant it, even though the Queen Street and Simcoe Street one barely didn't warrant it. Again, I'm a believer that we have to follow the warrant that is provided. So again, while I'd love to see a crossing guard at that location, it doesn't meet the threshold, and specifically as well, the one current location in Springwater with a crossing guard doesn't come anywhere close to the warranted threshold. So I will be supporting. Thank you.
Counselor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just also have a comment. Well, actually, I have two comments. One with respect to the Queen Street East and Simcoe Street. I don't know how often we do this type of study. I do think with the number being so close to the 500 mark, it would warrant a study potentially in a year from now or 2 years, however that works. There are, a number of new homes still going into Elmvale. And then I would just like to speak to the one in Hillsdale, as that is my ward. And I do feel very bad that we are potentially in a position where we're going to lose that crossing guard. However, when you look at the numbers, I don't know how I could support them keeping theirs while schools that are much higher in the threshold aren't getting them. That's just a general comment, unfortunately.
Thank you, Counselor Alexander. I will go to GM Ramdeo as to when the next or how often we do these types of studies, but I do agree that having a level of service across the municipality is very important. I think that one level and a consistent level of service is important. And again, even in Hillsdale, with that subdivision that's coming in, the realignment of the school, who knows what's going to happen in the future. So we do need to continue to do these types of studies so that we are on that. And GM Ramdeo, you've come on. How often do we perform this type of research on our crossworks?
Well, thank you. Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to yourself and all of council. Per the policy, it is our intention to repeat this on an annual basis, these studies.
Thank you very much. Councilor, is there any further discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move, that was the, right, sorry, that was the amendment, and now we are back to the main motion as amended. And with any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And now it has carried. I will now move on to verbal reports, and first up is our Elmvale District High School agreement updates from Manager Dean.
Good evening, Ms. Mayor and members of council. So as was discussed at the June 21st meeting, staff has been meeting with the school board for looking at the renegotiation of the agreement for EDHS and is also looking at opening EDHS back up for drop-ins as was discussed at June 21st. So at this time, I do not have an update to provide on the full terms of updating the agreement, but we do have a posting out for facility monitor positions that will be utilized in the school to work towards opening the building, and we'll be reporting back next meeting with our further discussions with the school board and with the updates to the posting for the recruitment of the position.
Thank you, Manager Dean. I'll now move to General Manager. Oh, sorry, Council. Is there any questions or comments on that? I will now move to. Did you have a comment? No, okay, sorry. I was, sorry, I got hands flying everywhere over here. General Manager Ramdeo for an update on our development.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I do not have an update at this time. Thanks.
And I will move to Deputy Cabral for our county update.
I do have one. Bear with me just a second here. How do I get rid of that? There we go. Anyway, I'll just start off briefly. It might take a few minutes, so I hope you'll bear with me. There's a lot of stuff that came out, but County Council enjoyed a presentation by Kevin Weaver, President and CEO of Georgian College. Mr. Weaver provided an update on the college's current activities, the strengths and outcomes associated with the partnership between Georgian College and the county, specific to the expansion of skilled trades and share future initiatives focused on supporting workforce needs. So Georgian College is growing for the region and undertaking a $15.3 million modernization project this fall to launch new programs and expand existing offerings and support innovation and industry partnerships through shared investment between the college and the community. And they were seeking $1.5 million partnership with the county going forward to address the skilled trades gap and prepare future workforce. And I know that county has partnered with Georgian College in the past, so it isn't something new. Of course, Georgian College benefits the entire county, and Springwater Township has its fair share of students that attend there. But this fall, Georgian will undertake a significant renovation and expansion project to revitalize and modernize the center. Scheduled to open in September of 2025, Georgian will renovate and modernize up to 20,000 square feet of existing center and add at minimum an additional 20,000 new purpose-designed square feet to help scale in demand programs and expand and create signature learning spaces for skilled trades and education. Maybe we should look to them for helping us out with the hub, because if they can do that for $15.5 million, that's one heck of an accomplishment. Another report came from the Simcoe County Museum update regarding the Matthews Innovation and Transportation Gallery expansion project and site improvements. The project, if approved, will improve the storage and exhibition conditions for a large portion of the collection, as well as community programming opportunities for the museum. With council support, meaning county council support and approval enabled by the late Charles Matthews, the project will be scheduled to be undertaken in 3 phases. The project will honor the bequest of the late Charles Matthews and his family and allow the museum to better display and care for the museum collections, highlight Simcoe County's historical innovation, and provide enhanced cultural and heritage experiences for residents and visitors to the area. It anticipates a 7,300 square foot addition to the southeast corner of the main museum building and an additional 2,600 square foot mezzanine, bringing the new usable space to just under 10,000 square feet. Should the entire project phases be approved, the total project will be completed by 2030 and will serve as a celebration of Simcoe County Museum's 100th anniversary, both honoring the past and ensuring the museum is well positioned to meet the needs of current and future generations. They also spoke about a research study regarding Francophone seniors in minority situations, which will be undertaken to review living conditions, health status, care experience in a minority language. And that's going to be undertaken by the French Language Services Planning Entity, a research team from the University of Ottawa, working in collaboration with NTITE, extending an invitation to Georgian Manor to participate in this research program regarding Francophone senior populations in Ontario. So Georgian Manor was officially identified under the Ministry of Long-Term Care as providing services in French language relating to significant Francophone population in the geographic area that it serves. And the purpose of the study is to identify living conditions of Francophone seniors in minority language situations in Ontario, their health status, and their experience of care and language in long-term care. The Affording Housing Advisory Committee report. This was interesting, and I'm just going to basically read out to you some of the significant milestones that they've accomplished in the last number of years that they accomplished. It was a 10-year affordable housing and homeless prevention strategy update, started in 2022. Phase 1, 2014 to 2017, And just so we know, their planned original target was 895 units in place in each year. So in the first phase, they achieved 1,017 new homes. In the second phase, they completed 1,247 new homes. And the third phase is happening. This is the final year 20 till 24. As of December 31st, 2022, the strategy had realized 103% of its 10-year minimum target of 2,685 units. They actually achieved 2,775 new homes since 2014. So there are a ton of highlights. So far, 244 new homes in 2022, distribution of $1.29 million in rent supplements and housing allowance subsidies. Distributed 91,000 in affordable home ownership down payment supports. They also have a fund in place to effectively alleviate and reduce the number of evictions that would happen because people couldn't pay their rent. It gives them an opportunity to get back on board. 2.5 million in funding from the province of Ontario towards the county's creation of 14 units of supported housing at 77 Tiffin Street in Barrie for people experiencing mental health and addiction challenges. Anyway, they've done a fantastic amount of work here. The other thing you might want to be aware of is the Terry Fox run. They're going to close down Balm Beach Road. And that's for the Midland area. And it's happening on September the 17th, 2023. And they'll be running from Perkinsfield Park to Midland. And the bursary program. Everybody should listen up to this. Councillor Thompson, I'm sure you know lots of young people that would benefit from this living in our area. County of Simcoe is committed to working with member municipalities to support the pursuit of higher education through the county's longstanding education bursary program. 21 $3,000 bursaries are available to County of Simcoe students attending a post-secondary institution in Canada. One bursary is guaranteed for a resident of each participating member municipality. And for the first time, bursaries are now available to Simcoe County students who are entering any year of a post-secondary education anywhere in Canada, not just in our local area or Ontario. Part-time students are also now eligible for a bursary. The bursary provides those students accepted in the program with financial assistance to access post-secondary education and training. The program is consistent with the County of Simcoe's commitment to education, as well as encouraging community involvement and civic responsibility. For the second year running, and this is dealing with Georgian College, they will be offering local students additional financial support. Georgian College is offering an additional $1,500 to up to 5 students attending their institution of the ones that receive a student bursary through the County of Simcoe, subject to financial need as determined by Georgian College. New for 2023. I think I covered that. Anyway, for further information, for those of you who are out there listening, further information may be had. The easiest way to do it is just do a Google search, type in Simcoe County Bursary Program, and it'll bring up the information. And that's the end of it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Cabral. And one point on that, the presentation that was given by the library of the Matthews bequest was really exciting and super exciting that it's here in Springwater. They're talking about bringing basically like a place where that you can host weddings, where it's a larger center to attract people there, having a beer garden that goes kind of with the skating trail, and it's going to be an attraction here in Springwater, and it was beautiful. And the story behind, I think, I don't remember the word that they used to describe him, but unassuming, an unassuming man who ended up in turn leaving $4.8 million to the museum. And they showed pictures of him doing this, and it was the one of him moving these houses. So they selected 16 smaller buildings to be there, whereby residents can experience, from all over. And I thought maybe we should talk to them about our jail, because it's something that in Hillsdale that is, it's sitting there, it's not often utilized, or maybe not to the potential that it could be. But if we could just like pick that up and move it to the museum, then the County of Simcoe will take care of it and we don't get to see it. So maybe that could be an item added to our Culture and Heritage Committee for discussion. I just think it's a unique opportunity. So anyway, that was on that. And Council, is there any municipal updates? I'm gonna have Counselor Alexander and then Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So June 10th, Hillsdale CRA had their market vendor event. It was sold out in terms of the number of vendors that they could host. And great turnout from when I was there. It was a really good event. So I think it was very successful for yet another year. So that was great. And then, sorry. And then on July 1st, the Phelpston CRA will be having their annual Canada Day fireworks dusk, and there is no entrance fee, but we do request a donation of fireworks, or there is an email address set up if you would prefer to do a monetary donation, which will then go towards the fireworks.
Counselors Garwood and then Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a few things I want to mention. I know the community is very excited about seeing the splash pad opening soon. So again, I know there's been a lot of folks asking. Staff did recently communicate out to residents, letting them know that the splash pad is hopefully going to be operational by this weekend. But again, for anyone watching or interested in knowing about the splash pad's operation and when it will be operational, they have been undergoing some mechanical repairs and maintenance. So please keep an eye on the Township of Springwater social media for updates there. I do want to mention that the Springwater Farmers Market Elmvale opened last Friday, June the 16th. And it was really exciting to see the market back in operation again and seeing vendors fill the parking lot. For the first week, I think it was quite successful, and I want to congratulate all the vendors and staff for working hard on ensuring the market's success. I also wanted to thank Miss Potts and her grade 5 classroom. Last week, Mayor Coughlin, Trustee Grummett, and myself had the opportunity to visit the grade 5 classroom and speak with them. They just wrapped up their governance unit, and they asked many questions focused on their municipal government, our community, and schools. So I wanted to thank Miss Potts and her class for the opportunity to come in and connect with that group, which was really nice. And then my final item is the Elmvale CRA is hosting our very first event. Participants will follow a route around the village of Elmvale while answering pre-arranged questions. Participants will learn fun facts and history about the community we call home. For the little ones, there'll also be a kids scavenger hunt available. You can pre-purchase your scavenger hunt kits made up of items donated from local businesses around the Elmvale community. And all funds collected will be put back into the Elmvale CRA. The event is June the 3rd from 11 to 3, and we'll be starting at the Elmvale Fairgrounds. So the CRA is pretty excited to finally get our first event up and running. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Garwood. Counselor Fisher.
I just wanted to report back on the Midhurst Soapbox Derby. It happened on Saturday. I think it was a big success. I wanted to thank all the MCRA members who took part and volunteered. It really doesn't happen without them. But I also wanted to thank all the families from Midhurst and surrounding areas, actually some as far as Sudbury, for coming down and being observers and participants. So we hope we see you next year, and we're maybe thinking of having adults race at the end. So Mr. Matt Garwood, if you want to race against me, I challenge you to it. All right.
Thank you. Council, is there any other updates? Not seeing any. We do tomorrow have our Springwater Swing, and I just wanted to thank our staff for the diligent effort that they are putting into this. It's going to be pretty exciting. They've got a lot of hard work that's gone into it. We saw them racing around here tonight, so I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you've put into that, and I look forward to a great day on the course tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to all the friendly sign bets amongst yourselves again. All right, and we will now move on. Oh, yes, sorry, Deputy Cabral.
Mayor Coughlin, I just would like to know how we fared as far as registration is concerned. If I happen to bump into somebody late this evening that wants to attend, is there still room available, or are we sold out?
Manager Dean is still here. Thank you for staying with us. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, Deputy Mayor Cabral, and through the rest of council. So the event is sold out. We have 114 golfers, and we have a title sponsor being Geranium. We have our multiple other various sponsors through the different levels for welcome bags, gift bags, gold, silver, our whole sponsors, and some prize sponsors. So we have many of our local community members that will be playing from different organizations, as well as some neighboring municipalities. So we're looking forward to a great day, and the weather looks awesome.
Thank you. I will now move on to notices of motion, and the first I have is by Councillor Fisher. I would just ask for your seconder. Councillor Moore, and I will turn to Councillor Fisher for his notice of motion.
Be resolved that this council affirms that the existing residents in the Midhurst settlement area will not be required to connect or pay for any of the new infrastructure services related to the wastewater treatment plant that is being constructed to service the new Midhurst Landowners Group developments and required in the Midhurst Secondary Plan OPA 38. And further, that unless ordered by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, the town of Springwater will not require residents currently on private septic systems to connect to any new wastewater treatment system. What I'm looking for from council is really reaffirmation that this council will not be forcing residents not only in Midhurst, but in fact, all of Springwater, since we're seeing development to hook up at their cost to septic systems, or sorry, sewage system.
All right, thank you. And I do have comment on that. And that actually came up when Councillor Garwood and I were at the school. And one kid who may or may not live on Buckley Street was also very concerned about such. So I was like, you take that back to your residents and let them know that this council. So thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Fisher. Is there any other comments on that? Councillor Moore?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Director Spagnell. Is there, if this is passed, what I would like to see is when the infrastructure is taking place, that at least there's T's to each driveway or each home, so that down the road, should they decide to hook in, that's an option and you're not ripping up an entire roadway to do that. That's there's sort of some pre-work done. Is there an option for that?
I can actually go to GM Ramdeo. I had a conversation. That's okay. I can go to GM Ramdeo. Similar comments on Buckley Street because they are bringing it to the residents' home. So that should a well need to be decommissioned or 20 years down the road, they've changed their mind, or maybe they want to hook up today. But the intent is not to have council forcing anyone to make that decision. GM Ramdeo, can you speak to that, please?
Yes, I can. Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to all of council, to Councillor Moore and all of council. They are two separate scenarios, so I'll address them separately. Buckley Street and sewage systems that might be done by the developers. Buckley Street is a water main connection, and it is part of our process is to put the provisions for connections. The actual connections will be up to the residents if they wish it or not. That is a township project and a township decision. The sewage systems that are being put in by the developer, and Director Spagnell can correct me if I'm wrong, but the developers will not be putting in T's for future connection by the existing residents. If we do wish that, I would suspect that we would have to enter into a conversation with them in terms of that process and in terms of the funding of it and likewise.
Director Spagnell is nodding.
I don't have anything further to add.
Okay.
Mayor Coughlin.
I will go to Deputy Cabral and then back to Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would think that, you know, someone on a septic tank, and I'm thinking septic specifically here. I think it would be fairly costly to put a T in. However, I think if I just recently installed a septic tank, I wouldn't want to hook up anyway, but given they last maybe who knows how long, you might have someone who needs to get a new septic tank, all of a sudden hooking up to the local sewage system makes a lot of sense to them. So I'm just kind of wondering whether or not that's something that if an agreement could be arrived at with developers, that's one thing. But if it's going to come back to cost township money to put that T in there, that's going to be closed off at one end. I'm just thinking if I was going to hook up and they're going to dig up the road anyway, they can put in a T for me at the same time. So I'm happy with the motion, but that would be just the one thing I would kind of question.
Councillor Fisher?
Just through you, Mayor, to Mr. Schmidt. I know there was a bit of maybe confusion and discussion, particularly during the last election. If you could clarify for us, the present council cannot tie the hands of future councils. So what I mean by that, and if you can clarify for us, that the next council theoretically could vote to have people hook up, right? So when I'm looking for an affirmation from this council, it really pertains to this council. So I just wouldn't mind it if you could clarify for council, but also the public that that in the future, it's dependent on the council of the day.
And whether council reconsiders their own motion. So it does provide our direction and our decision today, but we have, as a council, reconsidered 5 or 6 things at this table already. So I mean, yes, we can't, like you said, fetter or handcuff a future council, but we can also change our own minds too. CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Coggan. I believe you may have just answered the question, but just to confirm, that's correct. My understanding is that Councillor Fisher, yes, what you're asking for tonight would essentially be as in effect tonight, and there could be a reconsideration at any point during this term, and or a future council could change that direction, if you will. I will, while I have the mic, maybe just speak to the not engineers, so maybe GM Ramdale might help me here, but my understanding is the infrastructure in Midhurst specifically that's being considered or proposed for essentially the sanitary sewer, it's a force main and it's a pressurized system, and hence you cannot just tie into it. So there would be additional infrastructure that's required, and it would only be those individuals on that road, if you will, that possibly could tie in. All the other existing residents, other infrastructure would have to be put in place down each roadway, which would be an additional expense, obviously, to the township if we chose to walk that path.
Thank you, CEO Schmidt. Council, if there's no further discussion, Councillor Fisher has asked for a recorded vote, and I will turn to Clerk Ainsworth for that.
Thank you. The main motion, a recorded vote was requested. When I call your name, please state yes or no. Councillor Garwood,
Yes.
Councillor Alexander,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Fisher,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cabral,
Yes.
and Mayor Coughlin.
Yes,
That motion is carried.
unanimous. Back to Councillor Fisher. I have 13.2, a notice of motion regarding traffic speed issues on Sant Road, and I need a seconder for this motion, please. And I have Councillor Moore for that, and I will turn to Councillor Fisher to read his motion.
Thank you. Whereas Sant Road is used as a shortcut through Midhurst, with residents noticing aggressive driving and excessive speeds through the S Bend. And whereas young families and young children make up the majority of the residents in the area, be it therefore resolved that the staff report be brought forward outlining the options to curb the traffic and speeding issues in the area, including costing and appropriateness of installing speed bumps on both sides of the S Bend, and further that the report be provided by the July 5th, 2023 regular meeting. The reason I'm bringing this forward, actually, I've gone and sat with residents, and there is a fair bit of aggressive driving through that S Bend. Some people are cutting through it, and that's why I'd like a staff report. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair to General Manager Amdeo. Usually with speed bumps, is there not some kind of traffic assessment that takes place first, and would July 5th be enough time to do that?
GM Ramdeo.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Thompson. Yes, there is an assessment that needs to be done. In this particular instance would be compared to our traffic calming policy. Having said that, and it takes time to get that assessment done. It generally is a 1-week speed study. Having said that, back in August of 2021, we did do a speed study along Sant Road, and we did bring a report out of that in October of 2021 to reduce the speed limit from 50 kilometers to 40 kilometers an hour. Given the motion that's before us now, if that motion does go, my intention would be to update this report to use that speed study, because according to our traffic calming policy and our speed assessment policy that we passed recently, it would still be valid. And to use that as the basis of any report that would need to come forward on July 5th.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this request for information? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. Council, are there any additional notices of motion? And I have Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I will be bringing a motion forward then.
Follow me for more advice or tips.
I will be bringing a motion forward next meeting regarding the skating tarps at the Snow Valley Highlands Park. And looking to have those funded for the winter of 22-23 actually. And I'll just say that they did manage to raise half the money once again for those tarps. So we'll be looking to have the balance paid. Thank you.
Any additional notices of motion? Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. So I'm not sure exactly how, if we can bring this forward now. I'm going to be looking for Clerk Ainsworth help on this because it is on the fly. Similar to the discretionary fund discussion, I have been in discussions with the Phelpston CRA regarding donating $500 of the Ward 2 discretionary fund towards the Canada Day fireworks. The money certainly wouldn't need to come. The funds wouldn't need to be paid prior to July 1st, but I'm assuming the approval would need to be there if I am promising something that we don't have a policy for yet. So I'm not sure the best way to bring that into discussion.
Give me 1 second with that and I'm going to try and stick handle it. So because we don't have, and I'm working on this, so this is just, because we don't have a policy in place, I guess it would be with your own comfort level, because once that policy is in place, it wouldn't be a decision of this council whether that is something or not. So I think what we're looking for is, I guess we're getting carts ahead of the horse here, in my opinion. There's things that we want to do in our communities with that money, and the policy is still not finalized. So like you said, that could come from that account. There could be more things we could do. So I guess it's to the discretion of this council if we want to figure out some other way to ensure that that happens. But my suggestion would be that we wait until we finalize a policy so that we assure that these initiatives, whether it is, and if, like Councillor Moore's, we are backdating something. So there's always a way to make something happen. I just think that if we're creating rules in a policy, we should stick to the rules that we're creating. And that's just my advice. So I don't know, CAO Schmidt, if you have any other advice. And I guess this is a notice of motion and I'm completely need to waive my procedural bylaw to discuss it. Or is this a notice of motion and then we can discuss it at the next meeting? And this is a notice of motion that you would like to use funding?
So it's a notice of motion, I guess, that I would like to use funding, or ask that when we do the policy, if we are able to backdate it for the 2023 year, if what I'm proposing fits in that policy. My mistake in that, I assumed when we approved it, that the money was there. So that's certainly my mistake. So I don't know if we can add something in the policy that says, if it meets the criteria that we approve on, we have the ability to backdate that for the 2023 year.
I have a suggestion in our past term, and I don't know if it was 1 or 2. Council made a resolution whereby this council donated a certain amount of money to each of the CRAs to heighten their community events from the golf funding. And that is past practice that was approved by previous councils, and that would be a way to get that money, because you made a commitment to your community and there's no real way for us to validate that. But I think if there was a notice of motion whereby $500 was, and I'm not making notices of motion for you, but it could be a notice of motion whereby $500 is set aside to each of our local CRAs to enhance community events through whichever the year. That could be a possible notice of motion. If you would like to, you would have to say it though. Okay, all right, so I will move. Before I do that, I would like to have 8.47. 8.47, a suspension of procedures regarding notices of motion. Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. So that would be section 8.47 of the procedure bylaw, and it states that a motion to suspend or waive the procedures to consider a notice of motion presented directly at the meeting shall not be in order and will be called out of order if presented.
Correct. Thank you. So this, at our county meeting last week, we had to suspend our procedural bylaw in order to deal with something at that meeting. This being July 1st, and our next meeting of council is when? July 5th. So noticing those date changes, if it would be to council, I would like to put forward a motion. I can't put that forward though, can I? I'd have to pass the chair. Deputy Cabral, are you taking the chair for this?
I can, or I can just
Put it forward.
put it forward,
Thank you.
ask that we suspend the procedural bylaw at this time.
Thank you. Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. I just also want to bring another section to council's attention, but again, it would be council's discretion. Section 2.1, which is the suspension of procedures. The procedures contained in the procedure bylaw may be temporarily suspended, except for the procedure set out for closed session, pecuniary interest, and notices of motion. So council should be making this decision knowing that this is part of the procedure bylaw. Again, council can waive its entire procedure bylaw for one item specifically if they so wish to. That's what I would recommend that the motion contained if this is the way council to go.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm happy to do that, but I would like to provide comment afterwards.
And so we have that before us that we waive the procedural bylaw. Okay. For one item. And I need to mover and seconder. I have Councillor Alexander and Deputy Cabral. All those in favor? And we have waived our procedural bylaw to permit what I have mistakenly done before we waived the procedural bylaw. My apologies. I will move to Deputy Cabral, who has comment on this, and then back to Councillor Alexander.
Comment on this is pretty straightforward. The discretionary fund policy is going to be applying to individual councillors. We are now sitting as a council as a whole. A motion can now be put on the floor. The one before us is time sensitive in that coming back on the 5th doesn't serve the purpose of fireworks for their community on July the 1st. And I, to be quite honest, wouldn't be able to support $500 more to each CRA. However, I'm happy to propose that the $500 come from the discretionary fund for Ward 2 in advance through council as a whole.
Thank you for the comments. I was just looking for a way to not muddy something up, but I will leave that to Councillor Alexander. I believe that you do have options before you. So whichever notice of motion you wish to bring forward, I absolutely would be able to support. I mean, before we go on to tomorrow, Director Radigan, can you refresh our memory on how much money is still sitting in the golf tournament account? I didn't know that there was a motion on the table. Sorry. Oh, you made a motion? Well, we have a procedural bylaw that's been waived to deal with one issue, so I don't know if we should deal with that one issue, because if we deal with your issue, that.
It's Councillor Alexander's issue.
Okay, and I'm going to ask for clarification, because what I feel, Deputy Cabral, is you and I are both working with Councillor Alexander to find a solution to make this happen, and it's just in the easiest way possible. I myself do have problem assigning anything to a policy that doesn't exist yet. I mean, if this gets Phelpston a $500 commitment from a member of council and it gets other areas an enhancement for their CRAs, I think this is a win-win. And I think that we tomorrow are embarking on another golf tournament, and we have yet to spend funding from the last 2 years. So I'm going to go to Director Radigan, and then I will return to Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to members of council. There is an existing balance from prior years' spring water swing tournaments of $50,000 that remains unallocated. Thank you.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to members of council, as an alternative, potentially. you could consider, if council is supportive of this, is taking the funds out of the tax rate stabilization reserve. And then once the policy is actually approved, having the funds reimbursed to the tax rate stabilization reserve. And or, as you mentioned, Mayor Coughlin, there are other funding sources such as the net proceeds from last year's golf tournament that could also be utilized in the same way and temporarily essentially finance this if you wish. So other options for you to consider.
Thank you. And I do think that even on all of our, whatever the swag that we put out there, we tell people they're sponsoring us to heighten our community and support our community events and our community initiatives. So this to me is a community initiative. It's exactly what we did when people were sponsoring a golf tournament. So I think it's aligned. And Councillor Alexander.
Yes. I am happy to go with CA Schmidt's recommendation, whether I think I would prefer it probably came out of this Springwater swing, and I'm happy to have it put back in afterwards if need be, or if not, I don't know if I feel incredibly comfortable taking it from a tax stabilization fund, even if we are paying it back. I think it's kind of a bad look. So I will leave it to Clerk Ainsworth to wordsmith that.
Thank you. I did offer a bio break about 45 minutes ago, so sorry about that. I forgot that. No, I didn't. I mumbled it and I said, should I offer that after? And then we just kept going. So my apologies. Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. So there is an option. So from my understanding, it would be funded from the golf tournament funds and then replenished once the policy is approved. So it can be included in the motion. Or it could just be as part of your discretionary funds. Because the policy is not approved yet, there could be, I would recommend possibly not including that in there because it could muddy the resolution in the future, and then you could be responsible for just transferring those funds, making that request through the policy procedure once it is approved. Is that okay?
I am good with your recommendation if staff is good, or CAO Schmidt's good with that.
Thank you. And we have here specific to the Phelpston CRA, does the council want to entertain all of our CRAs with the same type of donation? And then it's just a donation from council and we don't have to worry about repaying anything? Or you just want to stick strictly to this one with repayment? Okay. Garwood, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. With the Elmvale CRA just getting started and getting off of our, the ground, we have zero funds and we are operating on a $0 budget. So selfishly, if it is selfish, while this is being brought forward, I would like to advocate for the Elmvale CRA and all CRAs in Springwater.
Perfect.
And see this distributed 500 for each of the 6 or 7 CRAs.
Yeah.
If Councillor Alexander is fine with that.
Yes.
Thank you. So before us, council, we have that council hereby approve a donation of $500 to each of the community recreation associations to be funded from proceeds of the Springwater Swing Golf Tournament. I need a mover, Councillor Alexander, seconder, Councillor Garwood. All those in favor. Thank you. And now back to Deputy Cabral, who had comment on. Oh, I thought you said you wanted comment after. My apologies. So our procedural bylaw is back in effect. Everything's back to normal. Here we go. I'm afraid to ask, does anybody else have any notices of motion that we need to deal with this evening? Seeing none. No, I'm just teasing. No, if anybody else does have any notices of motion or items for future consideration at this time. And I have Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I will just run this by the clerk first. I had asked to have the clerk to speak with Director Spagnol about the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Program. And excuse me if you've already presented this and I wasn't aware, but could we please get a report on how that is different from the MZO process and what that looks like for people coming forward now, because they're going to use every little tool in the toolbox. Thank you.
Director Spagnol.
I think Mayor Coughlin through to Councillor Moore. You don't have to apologize. I think we put a one-liner in a report where we were talking about the MZO protocol. And really the big difference between the two processes and one is that one is a municipally initiated request to the province. With a business plan and with information, and it's initiated through a specific resolution by council to consider a specific project that the municipality wants to carry forward with. The MZO process that has occurred or that have occurred in the past are really private initiatives where they're asking council to support their initiative. So that's the key distinction. I would be happy to forward council some information on that particular process. And then if you feel a report's needed to differentiate between the two, then I'd be happy to do so. But on the interim, I can send that information over to council for information purposes by way of email.
Thank you, Director Spagno.
Follow
on.
No, that's perfectly fine. I didn't realize that the MZO process had been done away with, so to speak, and this was a new replacement. So, but I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other items for future consideration? Seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to approve our bylaws? Councilors Moore and Thompson, that the bylaws listed herein and signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk 2023-069 to appoint a municipal law enforcement officers, 2023-070 development charge bylaw, and 5,372 LH 2023-002 First Elms Holding. Are there any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And may I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please? I have Thompson and Garwood. That bylaw 2023-071 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on June 21st, 2023, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And may I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting, please? Councilors Garwood and Thompson. That the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 8:51 p.m. to meet again in a regular session on July 5th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried.